think, as Adhar said, it's very important to make things either comedic or extremely entertaining or softer so that people enter the story easily. And then our audience is intelligent enough to kind of fill up the gaps, fill up with their own anecdotes, their own reference points, their own stories from their own lives. And that's when the takeaway kind of becomes easier to distill and take back home. Therefore, once you bring them in and you can see that you and I are both in the same boat, we've had similar experiences, then the point I'm trying to drive home from my stories becomes easier for them to distill and take home.
I think it's not far away from what Diana was also talking about. Like, it's the sense of community. I think, like when you're watching something and you're feeling a similar kind of emotion, I think you also feel like you're bonded. Like, that used to happen also. Like when we used to go to the cinema before, like it's almost like sometimes you're laughing in a comedy and you're almost like backslapping the person next to you. But it might not be a friend, but sometimes you just like realize that and it's the same emotion. And I think, with the live performance aspect, it's amazing because I think there's feedback immediately. So I think it's as a performer, as a creator, it's fantastic because you get that sense of community, and I think that emotion and that thrill and that rush is like it's like there's nothing like that.
Well, I think that, one thing that sort of derails people is the idea that this is an incredibly overwhelming idea. This is, we're doomed already. Global warming has happened. There's nothing we can do. But I think that in the very title of this conference, Conscious Collective, it's if you work from your own conscience and then everybody also works from theirs, then together we actually can affect change. And, it's the small moves that make the difference.
All right, December 12th, 13th, 14th, it's Conscious Collective, the third edition by Godrej Enterprises Group. It's a remarkable festival because there's nothing quite like it in the firmament in India. It's basically an entire festival that is devoted to conscious living, collective responsibility, and resilient businesses. And 94.3 Radio 1 very proudly associated with the festival, the third year on the trot. This year's theme is Reclaiming Cool, Beating the Heat Together. And what I'm doing is a precursor of conversations leading up to the event. Entry is absolutely free. It's at the Godrej Enterprises Group complex in Vikhroli. They really transform it into a beautiful, beautiful installation, immersive series of things you can participate in, but you must register because the space is limited. So go to Book My Show and register. This morning, though we're taping it in the evening, the conversation is airing this morning. Please welcome Diana Kellogg. She's founder and principal architect at Diana Kellogg Architects. Hi, Diana. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, thanks for having me.
And my friend Adhaar Khurana, director, Go With The Flow from
Hi,
AK
bro.
Various. Hi,
How's it
Adhaar.
going? Nice to be here. As
And for the
always.
first time, Nishu Dixit, actor, writer, storyteller associated with Kommune. Hi, Nishu. How are you?
Hi, very well. Thank you for having me.
All right, I want to start with you, Diana. Your work often treats comfort as a form of dignity rather than just a design outcome. Now, what first shaped your belief that architecture can change how people feel cared for in their everyday lives?
I think as a intuitive person, I've always been very much affected by my environment. And it doesn't mean that it has to be in order to feel comfort in a space, there's various elements that actually contribute to that. And it doesn't mean that it has to be a luxurious or, expansive space. Sometimes the smallest spaces can surprise you in being the most comforting. Um, and I think, I feel it's a responsibility as the architect to actually address those issues, the issues of feeling treated with dignity and feeling comfort as well. It seems, and beyond what you imagine as to be sort of comfort. You know, uh, yeah.
Adhaar, Go With The Flow speaks about water, hope, survival through the eyes of children. How wonderful. What made you feel that this story needed to be told now and in this particular way?
I mean, I think it's the last decade or so I mean, the environment is, I mean, we are going through massive global warming and there's a general climate crisis. So I think there was something And I think we around that time there was some of this going around India as well, where there was this water crisis, and it actually in some of the metros as well. So the writers Siddharth Kumar and Sarthak Kakkar, they actually kind of came up with this idea, and it's quite interesting because it's like it's dystopian, but it's kind of set in reality because you feel like these are problems that are still relevant right now. But so the fun thing is that the water mafia is played by a bunch of kids. Like so, it's interesting because the water is controlled by these kids. So it's a interesting situation in that sense that you kind of see it through their eyes, and you're seeing how people are fighting fire and kind of how it's we are in a very barren state in that sense. And I mean right now with the AQI and stuff like that, we're going through massive changes in the environment. So yeah, it was. I think it was actually topical in that sense. So I think it came together very nicely, and it was kind of appropriate, and it's still relevant. I mean, we opened like 2 or 3 years ago, but yeah,
Yeah, still relevant, absolutely. Nishu,
yeah.
your work often sits at the intersection of personal memory and larger social themes. When you think about climate or our changing environment, what moment or what feeling do you find yourself returning to?
Um, there are various memories, I'd say, but there's one in particular. So I grew up in the Northeast, and I often remember myself with my father when I was quite young, planting zinnia trees in our garden in Arunachal Pradesh. And then he and I would take a walk through our vegetable garden. And how that image progressively is becoming more and more unrealistic as we've continued to move out of those places. We live in cities now. Our gardens are no more horizontal but vertical. So every time I think of the environment around me, I just have this sense of how that image will never be mine anymore. And while there's still hope, but yeah, that image for some reason keeps pulling me back. The greenery, the orchids all around, and how I'll never be able to get to that place again. Yeah.
Oh, that's a privilege growing up in the Northeast, in the green hills of the Northeast. Wonderful. Now, if you, it's a small plug. If you want to hear Diana at the festival, it's a 2 p.m. conversation, 2 in the afternoon on the 13th. The theme is reclaiming shade, resilient design, and the built environment. And Diana Kellogg will be in conversation with Sameep Padora from Sameep Padora and Associates. And if you're looking to catch this incredible play that Adhaar is just talking to me about, then please make sure that you register. Like I said, that's very important. And it is on the 12th of December. It's Go With The Flow, 7 p.m. in the evening. So it's a 7 to 8:30 performance. And finally, our third guest, if you want to catch her at the festival, 1 in the afternoon on the 14th. This is spoken word performance by Mahi and Nishu from Kommune. It's a 40-minute performance. That's 1 in the afternoon to 1:40 in the afternoon. Okay, back to questions with Diana. The Gyan Center in Jaisalmer shows how a building can protect, cool, and empower without relying on machines, Diana. What did working in that harsh desert climate teach you about what true comfort really is?
One of the things that I read early on when I was working on the school was that you had to be careful with some of the stone buildings because they were very cool in the morning for the children. These children are used to the desert climates. This is their way they live. And actually, if you overcool their school space, it's uncomfortable for them to go home. And I was reading this article about how the possibility to get sick in spaces that were actually too cool could be equally as problematic as, the discomfort of a overly heated space. So it was interesting because I had not thought about that necessarily. And it gave me a great deal of perspective on what does it mean to be comforted in a space, and what is physical comfort, and how does that change in different environments, in different climates, and in different cultures. So I think that that's an important thing just in general for us to understand. We not all the temperature ranges are necessarily perfect for one person, and that it should be something that is always responsive.
I'm such a fan of all the work that AK Various puts out. And I know this is an anniversary year for you guys. Many congratulations.
Thank you.
And one thing I do notice is that whenever you take a play that deals with a serious crisis, you infuse it with other elements, and in this case, energy, music, humor. Why do you think imagination and play, and by play I mean literally, children playing, help
Yeah.
people understand difficult realities more deeply or better?
I do feel like I think the like if you tell it in an entertaining way, I think the take home is much stronger. I feel like sometimes it's very interesting because you're seeing something fun and then suddenly you're like, oh wow, they also said that. And I think that's what we kind of pride ourselves on because I think the first foremost thing is to entertain, and of course then if you have some take home, it's we are very happy about that. So and I think yeah, when there's humor, there's song and dance. In this case, it's a big also, like I was saying earlier, it's told from the point of view of the children. So I think it's very easily accessible. I think it makes it very relatable and accessible, and it's a very good aid into the play. So actually, the funny thing is that now that we've done a fair amount of shows, uh, it's weird because even though it's meant to be a play for children, adults also really enjoy it, and it's like
Wow.
yeah, they come over there saying, okay, we've come with our kids to show them the play, but we've also really enjoyed it. So I think that's also fun for us in the sense to kind of, you're appealing to a larger demographic in that sense. So yeah, I think and it's always nice when someone tells you, we had a lot of fun, but we also, you know, went home and thought about this. So we are like, okay, cool, that's great. Thank you.
Yeah, and what I was referring to is it's 25 years of AK Various, which is the Khurana family's production house. So that's what I was congratulating Adhaar for. So 25 years and counting and doing very well.
Rest wishes, yeah.
Nishu, I've covered a lot of climate in my decades in radio. And whenever I've covered climate, the stories are always told in data and urgency. I mean, no disrespect to people who do that because that's their job. But you approach them through people, through relationships, through quieter emotions. Why do you think a softer entry point is required now for an audience?
If I put myself in the audience's shoes, I often find myself like I'm in a race against time, like there's very little time left for me to take action. And that doesn't put you in a place where you can actually do anything tangible. So I think, as Adar said, it's very important to make things either comedic or extremely entertaining or softer so that people enter the story easily. And then our audience is intelligent enough to kind of fill up the gaps, fill up with their own anecdotes, their own reference points, their own stories from their own lives. And that's when the takeaway kind of becomes easier to distill and take back home. Therefore, once you bring them in and you can see that you and I are both in the same boat, we've had similar experiences, then the point I'm trying to drive home from my stories becomes easier for them to distill and take home. Yeah.
All right, Conscious Collective, 12th, 13th, 14th at the Godrej Enterprises Group campus in Vikhroli as dialogues on conscious living. There are specially curated workshops for those interested in design, in architecture, in art, and creative exploration. There are children's workshops designed to empower tomorrow's change makers. So if you're a parent and you want your child to take part in these wonderful activities, please go register and book my show. And of course, there are immersive, mindful screenings, experiences that people like Nishu and Adhar are part of. So that really is the kind of segmentation, the categories that you will find at Conscious Collective. Back to this particular chat and tell us what you feel about it. I'm at HRISHIKAY across social media. Diana, your projects respond very deeply to their landscape and community. I'm very keen to know how the people and the places that you work with influence the way that you think about climate, about resilience, and creating spaces of belonging.
Um, I think that there's obviously lessons learned in every project that I do. A lot of projects I do are in extreme climates. And one of the things that impressed me was going into the villages in India. And actually, in many ways, they are very sustainably conscious in the sense of nothing is ever thrown away, everything is saved. From the profound to the mundane. The plastic bottles are saved, and made into baskets in some places that I went. So there's an automatic reverence for the earth and for uh, for zero waste without even thinking about it. It's just something that's a part of their lives and of their soul, and it's a it's an overall duty or feeling of duty to not just yourself, but to everybody else, and to the planet on which we live, just from a natural way of living. And I was incredibly impressed by that when I visited people in India.
Adhaar, you just told us fleetingly about how parents of children who have come and watched the play over the last couple of years have reacted. I'm very keen to know how young audiences, the Gen Z, react when they watch the play. What reactions or moments have stayed with you? Especially when they realize, listen, hey, this story is not far away from what we're going to go through in the future.
Yeah, I think, of course, the accessibility and the relatability is one thing, but because just actually going from what Diana said, one interesting thing we did with the set design was that because it's kind of set in a dystopian land where it's all kind of the world is disintegrating and like there's a water crisis, everything's kind of meant to be barren, and all our like the entire set is built out of plastic. Like we are just like the all so everything is. Like even like if it's a bench, it's made out of like plastic bottles or whatever. So the idea was also to kind of like immediately when an audience comes and settles down, the visual that is already quite interesting for them. So a lot of people have come and told me like even before the play started, for us that was really interesting that you're already kind of driving home that point where you're like, we are in that, we are the pollution is such a big problem right now, and that's where we are at. So I think, yeah, in terms of, I think I do feel like Gen Z is actually much more conscious than perhaps we are also. There's a massive sense that they actually like, even Nishu was saying that, they're all very intelligent. Yeah, it's like you just have to reel them in, and once they're in, and like there's so much take home, and there's sometimes the audiences will come and say stuff that you haven't seen. Like there's finding depth in like meaning in stuff that you're like, oh wow, I've never seen it like that. But that's cool that you said that, man. And like and yeah, as in I think it's just like I mean our last curtain call song is also a song by Jack Johnson, which is about recycling the 3 R's and stuff like that. So everyone goes home happy. That song is resonates with them, and yeah, they're like, okay, well, maybe we'll try today not to litter or recycle. So yeah.
Well, you had me at Jack Johnson. Jack Johnson is good. Yeah, as somebody who's attended the last two editions of Conscious Collective, if you have, you would know this, Nishu. If you haven't, just a pointer thrown your way. I noticed that people are either feeling vulnerable, people are feeling extremely hopeful, and some even feel guilty. I mean, I've had myself come out of sessions and say, man, what are we doing to the planet? And feeling guilty. Now, in the midst of vulnerability, hopefulness, and guilt, what emotion do you want to make space for?
Honestly, I mean, it's a no-brainer. Hope is what I'd be going for, and I think all artists would want to instill hope as much as possible, because that's only when you have hope, you have pause and space to maybe take tangible action. Like for example, Commune does a lot of sustainable events, and when we go to say a spoken fest, we are there to hear stories, but we come back understanding that this whole setup is also sustainable. Like they're recycling their scrap, they are using recycled bottles and all of that. So while you're consuming stories, you're also coming in touch with various other touch points. So you see hope in action at events like that. So I would just want to kind of amplify that through my stories as well, so that action is easier to take. Yeah.
Nice. And I must tell all of you who are watching or listening that what they do is they take over the Godrej Enterprises Group campus in Vikhroli and they really create something like an Alice in Wonderland there. There are these wonderful art installations. So apart from all the dialogues and the panel discussions and the screenings, there are these live installations actually created by artists, sculptors, design folk that you could just spend the whole day looking at and watching. So register at Book My Show for Conscious Collective. Diana, at one end is architecture and the other end is music and theater. A lot of people would say, is that a contradiction? Why are both ends of the spectrum at Conscious Collective? What do you think thoughtful design shares with performance when it comes to creating experiences that bring people together? I mean, somebody like you in your line of work, in common with these artists, Nishu and Adhaar.
Well, I think that architecture is about performance in many ways. I mean, you're in a home, you're having, it's not as interesting as the theater you're making, but it is an everyday sort of play of how people interact. And one of the things that is my favorite thing to do when I finished a building is actually see how people were are gather in the space and where the places where people have serious dialogue and where people play and where people interact. And actually one of my favorite things that happened with the girls school is I had noticed a lot of the interactions, just actually a human reaction to interactions often happen in circles. um you know, whatever, I can bring up some examples, but one of the things that was alarming and fantastic to me is that the girls, when they went into the space, they actually held hands and started dancing in circles. And similarly, I brought a friend who, when we arrived, she was American, and her instinct was just to run around the building. And, it's a pretty large expanse, and she just took off. And all the kids followed her, and all the kids followed her up onto the roof. And when she got back from this running, I said, Sharon, what were you doing? She said, I just felt that I needed to do this. And that
How cool.
was
How lovely.
so fabulous. Um, yeah.
All right. I feel, Adhaar, that we need theater more than ever before now.
Yeah.
I see kids on their social media feed alone in one corner just scrolling. Nobody goes to the theaters anymore, man. Everybody's just watching OTT on their phone or their pad or their, it's become such an individual experience. Where are the collective experiences? Theater creates its own kind of collective comfort. You know that. What have you learned about connection from watching audiences experience stories together? That shared emotion, that shared silence, and that shared laughter.
I think it's not far away from what Diana was also talking about. Like, it's the sense of community. I think, like when you're watching something and you're feeling a similar kind of emotion, I think you also feel like you're bonded. Like, that used to happen also. Like when we used to go to the cinema before, like it's almost like sometimes you're laughing in a comedy and you're almost like backslapping the person next to you, but it might not be a friend. But sometimes you just like realize that and it's the same emotion. And I think, with the live performance aspect, it's amazing because I think there's feedback immediately. So I think as a performer, as a creator, it's fantastic because you get that sense of community, and I think that emotion and that thrill and that rush is like it's like there's nothing like that. So yeah, I mean, like you said, I think a lot of people should just keep coming back to the theater. Because yeah, and I think we now like our world has become so individualistic and so like like it's all very solo, right? Everyone's on their own kind of everyone's like alone in a sense, not lonely per se, but I and with the devices and stuff like that. So I think theater and this performance per se also because of the song and dance and the entertainment factor. I think it just gives you a lot of joy and like the show is also like hope. So I think that's quite. I mean, it's lovely because when they come, when people like an audience come, it's like it almost feels like you walked out and they could be friends, right? Like it's like and they're meeting people and the characters they've resonated with, and they're like, we want to meet this person. They're talking to the character, not the actor. So I think yeah, that's it's quite lovely. I think joy and hope mainly.
Nice. Uh, Nishu, when you prepare a piece about our relationship with nature, where do you start? Is it a story, an image, a voice, or something entirely different?
I think it's all of these things for different stories. It could even be, say, the fragrance of Ratrani when I'm walking down a beautiful lane in Bangalore, thinking about how my day went. Recently, I think just a week ago, I was coming back from Juhu in a rickshaw, and knowing Bombay, there's construction sites everywhere, there's dust everywhere, there's these loud noises, and I'm on this mental rant that what can I do about it? Do I stay indoors all the time? And then suddenly I see this beautiful pink bougainvillea flower kind of peeping from those tin walls, temporary walls they create outside these sites. And I'm like, I'm going to write a poem about that. That's a beautiful, beautiful image, a beautiful, bright pink flower in this cloud of dust that the city has kind of become. So it could be anything, but it's image more often than not, I'd say, because the image has all the other layers kind of embedded in it, so you can peel them one by one. But it could be any of these triggers, honestly.
Well said. All right. You can log on to designlab.godrejenterprises.com. I'll repeat that, designlab.godrejenterprises.com. And you see Conscious Collective, you click on it, you'll get all the information, all the listings and everything. Book My Show has all the listings, and of course, you can register there, get the app, or just visit it on the World Wide Web. And there is an Instagram handle called Godrej Design Lab, at Godrej Design Lab. All right, good people, last round of questions. Diana, if you could leave the audience with one idea, just one idea, about how cities can design for comfort with simplicity, sensitivity, and care, what would you want that idea to be?
Well, I think that, one thing that sort of derails people is the idea that this is an incredibly overwhelming idea. This is, we're doomed already. Global warming has happened. There's nothing we can do. But I think that in the very title of this conference, Conscious Collective, it's if you work from your own conscience, and then everybody also works from theirs, then together we actually can affect change. And, it's the small moves that make the difference. And yes, the big new moves have to be taken care of, but we're, as individuals, not necessarily able to do that. So our ability is just to proceed with a thoughtful mind towards how we want to respect our planet.
Very well said. Adhaar, if there's one message from Go With The Flow that you hope Conscious Collective audiences carry with them, what would it be about caring for our world and for one another?
I mean, like I said earlier, I think just like, recycle. And I think it's weird because I think as a nation, Indians are very, like it's almost second nature for us to litter. I feel like no one thinks. And then like when you kind of like when you're with friends and you're like, okay, don't do that. And then it's weird because they'll be like, okay, because you're here, we're not doing it. Because like in front of you, we'll kind of keep it in the car and not. But the whole idea is that just do it, like you should be doing it generally. I mean, this is like, even if there's like that small thing of not throwing that wrapper out, or spitting outside the car, like I mean, it's just, even if someone goes back and doesn't do that and stops from doing that, I mean, for me, that's enough. I mean, because I feel like we are so like, I mean, it's just it's ingrained in us that, oh yeah, let's just throw something on the road. When we're driving down the car or we had a rickshaw, we'll like, whatever it is, we just open it and chuck it out, and it's like second nature. It's very interesting when you actually go and pull up someone and say, boss, don't do that. There's a bin right there. That they also get offended. But then if you do it nicely, I think they kind of like that. If you're very sweet about it, and so I actually started doing this thing where I would go and pick up the wrapper and I'd be like, and then people get really thrown and awkward. Like, so then they understand. So then it's not like why you pulling me up? Why you like talking to me like that? But I just feel like if small things like that can happen, that's a great take home and
Well
message
done, yes.
from the day.
Nishu, if someone leaves your performance at Conscious Collective thinking about comfort, not just physical comfort, but emotional and collective comfort, what shift would you hope that they experience when they leave your performance?
I'd like them to experience what I personally want myself to experience, that I'm not alone in this, that we are not climbing this uphill battle alone. We are there to hold each other's hands. And although a lot of damage is done, but like Adar said, when we look at kids, or when I go back home to my village and I see people there living their lives sustainably, like they're living their lives regularly. So there's still a lot of hope to undo some of this damage. And as long as we don't feel alone and lonely in this journey, if I can make them feel that, I think it would be a successful performance.
Wonderful. I really appreciate your time, Diana. Thank you very much. Adar, lots of love, my friend. And Nishu, all the
Cheers,
best.
bro.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. And see you at Conscious Collective. Yeah.
See you. Thank you. Thank you, Hrishi. Take care.
Thank you. Thanks, Hrishi.
See
Thanks.
you.
94.3 Radio 1.